think a lot of people think that the government can just regulate tech. Like, why can't we just regulate big tech as the problems currently stand and use some of the levers that we already have? We have privacy, antitrust, Section 230 reform. Let's talk a little bit about why this thing's going faster than government can possibly regulate.
Our country has something like 330 million people in it. Facebook has something like 3 billion people in it. Our government is getting increasingly slow at the ability to regulate anything as the representatives are getting more and more polarized. It happens to be that this tech is driving that polarization directly because the tech is driving the polarization of the population. The polarized population elects and supports representatives that are increasingly polarized. As a result, the government has less and less ability to get the support that it needs to move anything through. So the direct output of Facebook and the direct output of any kind of engagement platform like this is the decrease of the capacity of government to govern. And it's not true that the direct output of an oil company or a pharma company or whatever, it can create a social harm, but it's not directly decreasing government's capacity to govern. This is both decreasing government's capacity to govern while simultaneously applying recursive AI to increasing its own capacity to influence the whole population, including influencing population's views about it and about any governance that might emerge.
And let's talk about that. So Facebook, for example, in the Wall Street Journal Facebook files, one of the other revelations is that they have a project called Project Amplify. So as this counter pressure and negative attention from the world on Facebook becomes apparent, they basically have their own attention machine that actually is selecting stories that will basically make people like Facebook more. And what they can do there is to say, oh, this woman, she likes horses. So we'll talk about, here's a story where Facebook helped a lost horse find their owner. And they can do this at scale in a personalized way. So while they're decreasing the population's, the government's ability to govern, while polarizing people into crazier positions that then make the government further incapable of governing. And while this makes people upset at Facebook, they can actually fight that by continuing to basically brainwash the population at scale. And this speaks to a new kind of basically overwhelming power.
Yeah, and it's important to understand that whether a Democratic or Republican president get in office, Facebook keeps growing its total market cap size, AI capacity, data influence per person. Whether we get a GOP right or an alt-right person in makes no difference. When social breakdown occurs, whether it's George Floyd or COVID or something else, people spend more time on site trying to figure out what's going on. In a bull market, advertisers are spending more money. In a bear market, the huge juggernaut with the money consolidates. So Facebook continues to get more powerful kind of no matter what happens.
And it's not answering to a left-right divide. It doesn't have a crazy population. It doesn't have elected representatives. It can just make decisions much more rapidly than anything that is competing with it.
Yeah, we didn't pick a democratic system because we thought it was faster at decision-making than a monarchy or some kind of consolidated decision-making. We did it because we wanted something that would have checks and balances in power so that it wouldn't become a corrupted asymmetric power. But of course, a company is not a democracy. A company has a very consolidated choice-making process. And so as we have a company that can make choices much faster because it doesn't have a left-right divide that it has to appeal to internally, and it can apply actual machine learning to optimizing its own strategy. And you have that competing against something that has a huge number of people who have to agree that it's intrinsically polarizing against each other. You can just see that in the same way the printing press ended feudalism, this new information technology is ending modern democracies as we've known them. So what the printing press did is it made possible a newspaper where we could all become informed on the issues so we could go to a town hall and actually discuss them. Not just the printing press, but also the textbook. We could have a comprehensively educated population that knew how to make sense of the world, and then the newspaper, a comprehensively informed population that knew what was going on. We could go be in dialogue about it and engage in participatory governance.
And we could all fit into a town hall and have some sense of shared trust while we're debating, and maybe you have a different opinion, but I also know you and I know where your kids go to school. But when it divides us at scale without any of those relationships, in fact, it weakens our relationships with each other because we're actually more profitable, each addicted to our own phone, not talking to each other, than if we were in shared contexts, talking to each other. It also is eroding the fabric by which we might combat some of those polarizing forces.
So the social solidarity needed for democracy and the social contract is directly broken by Facebook's polarization. And the fourth estate, which is the capacity for everyone to understand what's going on in a similar way, not only is it broken, it's reversed. That not only are people not knowing what's going on in a similar way, they're believing what's going on in intrinsically polarized ways. And it's very well known that modern democracies depended upon a fourth estate as a prerequisite institution. And so it's not that surprising that something that comprehensively broke the fourth estate would be breaking democracy. So one of the critical questions, if we want to have a democracy moving forward, is in a post-social media world, how do we reenact something that has the capacity of a fourth estate to create shared sense-making and social solidarity across the population? We either figure out how to do that, or it's the end of modern democracy.